Hello, friends. I am very excited about this particular episode because we go over some very asked questions and concerns in my little corner of Twitter. So I speak with Jeffrey Sachs. He is a professor at Acadia University of Political Science. And lately he has been studying, is viewpoint diversity important in the academy? Now we go over a number of reasons why he thinks it is. Is one of those reasons because students, young and vulnerable as they are becoming indoctrinated by evil lefty, far, far lefty professors? Well, you're just going to have to watch to find out. If you are new, please don't forget to subscribe. And as always, I enjoy reading your feedback, so leave me a comment at the end of this one. Also, I am slightly sick in this episode, so please forgive the stuffed up sound of my voice. Or maybe it sounds good. Maybe it doesn't. I don't know. Let me know in the comments what you think. Hello, Jeffrey. Wait, I need to know, do you go by Jeffrey or Jeff? Because I've seen both.
So either one is fine, honestly. If you want to call me Jeff, that would be great.
Okay, I'll do Jeff. Because I just want to, as I have a friend who's like, it's Benjamin. So for you, Jeff, okay. Yeah, so Jeff is good. Okay, so hello, Jeff. I'm with Jeff Sachs. Is that correct how I said the last name? Sachs?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So we were just chatting about how you are in Nova Scotia. So you are teaching at a university there.
That's right. Acadia University. I teach in the politics and history department.
Okay. So I am just wanting to talk with you about diversity of thought in the academy. Right. So, because you said that you're studying that like right now.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm working on a project right now that focuses on the effects on students of the liberal dominance within the academy, specifically liberal dominance among faculty.
Okay. It sounds very intense. Liberal dominance. It's ominous.
I know. We need a less terrifying word to describe it. Imbalance, maybe.
Okay.
But whatever it is, it's big. The imbalance between conservative faculty and liberal faculty. The estimates kind of go up and down depending on how you measure it and what population you're looking at. But it's as low, or the imbalance is as low as about maybe 5 liberal faculty for every conservative one, to potentially as high as 10, 11, 12 liberal faculty for every conservative faculty in the U.S.
Okay, so you've looked at the numbers here. Like, you're not just looking around at Acadia being like, who's who?
No. I mean, I think Acadia would not be. I mean, Acadia is not a very good representation of what's going on in America, certainly.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, and that's a great point right off the bat, is that the variance in American schools is enormous.
Okay.
You're going to have a totally different experience if you are in a small New England liberal arts college versus in like a state university out west. Versus in like an elite Ivy League school. I mean, there's a huge amount of variety. So, when a student goes into school, as freshmen, they can't expect any one thing. It's going to depend a lot on where they end up.
Okay. So why does it matter that there's that disparity?
Yeah, that's a big question. I mean, I'm a liberal myself, and I feel like a lot of my fellow liberal academics think it doesn't matter. Which I mean, I don't want to say in general. Probably most agree it's a problem, but certainly there's a vocal minority who think, who cares? As long as students are able to get a good education, what does it matter?
Right.
And I think it does matter.
Yeah.
Let me tell you first why it does not matter.
Okay.
It does not matter because liberal faculty are not brainwashing students.
Okay.
There's the indoctrination thesis that you hear a lot about from conservatives. And the gist of it is that liberal faculty are using their power over grading, over pedagogy, over student advising to either subtly or not so subtly indoctrinate their students, make them more liberal, basically. There is very, very weak evidence of this, and it's been studied to death. There's a lot of research now on this. I'm happy to talk more about it, but the evidence for the indoctrination thesis is so weak that I don't think that's why we should care about liberal dominance in the faculty.
Okay, because that was my follow-up question that you answered is how do you know? So there's a lot of research.
How do I know that the liberal dominance?
How do you know that? What was it that you just called it?
Indoctrination
the
thesis?
Indoctrination thesis. How do you know that's incorrect?
Okay. So scholars have been pretty interesting. They've had interesting strategies to kind of get at this question.
But what if it's the liberals doing it though? What if they're I'm just conspiracy theorizing here.
I know. The good news is that there are also conservative scholars who work on this question, and they reach the same conclusions.
Okay.
So basically what they've done is they have tried to identify. So it is the case that more freshmen are liberal than conservative right now. So even before a person enters into college, they are more likely to be liberal. Mm-hmm. The most recent data I've seen from 2016, 2017 entering class was about 33% liberal, 22% conservative, and then the rest were unidentified, were moderate. So significantly more liberal than conservative. And that's for a lot of reasons, which we can talk about. So you would just expect, all things being equal, most graduates of university and college to be liberal, just because that's what they are going in. What we find is that when you compare graduates and also students to their socioeconomic kind of peers who are not involved in university, there's no real difference.
Really?
Yeah. So there's no real difference in terms of how liberal or conservative they are. There are differences in terms of more subtle questions of political attitudes, but you are no more likely to become liberal or become less conservative over the course of your 4 years in college or university than you would be over that same span of your life if you had not attended.
Okay, but then sounds good. But then also, why are people not evolving and changing in their university life?
You would expect, think about all the opportunities that professors have to kind of put their thumbs on the scale and change people's beliefs. I don't know whether you think this is a good thing or a bad thing, but it turns out that people are pretty fixed in their ways, that the real formative years are much earlier in a person's life as terms of their political attitudes. It happens through your upbringing. It happens through what your parents are. It happens through your race, your socioeconomic status. Those are much more determinative than what happens to you during your 4 years or however long you're in college or university. Now, what you do and what college and university can do is it does affect a couple different measures. First of all, graduates tend to become more politically active, especially if they engage in certain kinds of extracurricular activities while they're like internships or study abroad. Those are strongly correlated with likelihood to vote in presidential and midterm elections.
Okay.
It's strongly correlated with things like giving to a political party or canvassing, that kind of thing.
Okay.
So it makes you more politically active. It also makes you more politically knowledgeable. On average, graduates tend to be more politically knowledgeable even decades later than brothers and sisters who didn't attend. Okay,
so this is not either side, but just in general more politically active, regardless of liberal or conservative.
Whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or something else, you care more, you are active more if you're a graduate.
Well, that's probably good.
That is good.
I think. Okay.
Now let me tell you some things that some audience members might not like as much, depending on their politics.
Okay.
For one thing, it makes people more vocal about civil liberties. I think that's a good thing, right? So people tend to care more and value more about civil liberties, like the right of communists or atheists, bless you, or communists or atheists to participate in public debate or give speeches in their communities. Yeah. These questions are kind of of old, but they've been asked for decades.
Excuse
Bless
me,
you.
sorry.
It's also the case that it makes people more gender egalitarian.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, so I don't know. Yeah, I think that might be controversial, but for instance, they ask a battery of questions of people when they enter and exit university, and one of the findings is when you compare them to people who are the same age, same kind of socioeconomic status, who didn't enroll, the people who graduated tend to believe that women should be able to, or it's important that women have active roles in the household, that they be able to hold whatever position in the workplace they wish, things like that.
Okay.
So that is a finding. I don't know who would possibly disagree with that, but on the off chance that someone does, that is a finding that is pretty consistent across a lot of different studies.
Okay. Would you call that becoming more liberal? Because the more conservative... Wait. Did you say that women that the idea that women should have a role in the household? Who said? Did they say they should or should not?
No, sorry. What the studies show is that university is associated with people believing that women should have a more equal role in the household.
Oh, okay. Okay, so that does, my question is still like does make sense. So so I'm just saying that to myself. I'm like, oh no, you were on the right track, me.
No, you got it.
So is that a more liberal view? So is that a little bit more of a liberal position than
I think that depends on, that's up to an individual person. Like, I mean, when I say that, it doesn't make you more liberal or conservative. What I mean is that when you ask people, do you identify as strong liberal, strong conservative, somewhere in between, their views don't substantively change.
Right.
It does affect their feelings about civil liberties. It does affect their feelings about gender. But whether you think that makes a person more or less conservative, like I don't really know. That depends on a person's individual feelings about what it means to be conservative.
Okay. Because I'm just saying traditional. Like that's what I think of as conservative.
Yeah. I mean, I think that social conservatives in particular, there's lots of different kinds of conservatives. I do think that social conservatives face unique challenges in a lot of universities and colleges, and I don't want to mitigate that. But the survey data is pretty clear on this, that of all the types of conservatives who report feeling bias, perceiving bias in the university, social conservatives say it the most.
Okay.
And it's correlated too with elite schools, that the more kind of quote unquote elite a university, especially if it's obviously like a secular one, they are more likely to report this kind of perception of bias.
Okay.
The good news, I can say, maybe just to mitigate this, is that there is a pretty prominent study, a pretty rigorous one, that shows that university does not make people less religious.
Oh.
And that's because...
Oh, I know that is a big problem amongst... Don't want to go to philosophy class and deny God. So
yeah,
I've been told that.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
I've never seen that movie, God's Not Dead.
I just didn't know. I've been told that in my own life.
Yeah.
But I know that there isn't that movie where it's like, you better say that God...
I'm sure that happens all the time.
Yeah, but okay, do professors, like, are they the meanie professor who is like, you better not be writing about God and why he exists?
God, I hope not. I mean, I don't have an eyeball in every classroom. I've never seen anything like that. I mean, that just is so outlandishly insane to me.
Think that's just like one film writer's like idea? Like, did that really happen?
I think it's like the fever dream of a Hollywood social conservative script writer, screenplay who had this great idea. Let's have this caricature of an out of control PC liberal atheist in front of a classroom spouting nonsense for an hour and a half, and it's going to drive the audience wild. Okay. So at the level of propaganda, this movie, God's Not Dead, I'm sure it's really effective. But as a reflection of reality, it falls very far short.
Okay. I'm glad you cleared that up.
Yeah. And I mean, and this is the other thing is that, I'm happy to go on and on about how there is no evidence that university substantively changes people's views. It's also the case that the evidence that professors are trying but failing to indoctrinate is also very weak.
Okay.
So, this is what I'll say. I'm sure things do happen. I'm sure that in certain disciplines, especially maybe like anthropology or sociology, which tend to attract faculty who maybe are more approving of activist pedagogy.
Mm-hmm.
You will see some professors doing this.
Okay.
But again, it's so rare and it's so ineffective. And all the tools that you think a professor might use to ram, marks down someone's throat, like playing with their grading, giving conservatives worse grades, like that doesn't happen. Again, the studies have looked at grading. They've compared liberal versus conservative prof, liberal student versus conservative student. They've done all different experiments and surveys, and it's very consistent. If there is a difference, it is so minuscule that it doesn't even equal half a letter grade on a single assignment.
Really?
It's so minor.
Okay, so I am thinking, just the work you're doing reminds me a little bit of the work that Jonathan Haidt did on the, or Haidt did on the, I don't want to say Haidt, oh my gosh, Jonathan Haidt.
Yeah.
I gotta get that one right. Sorry, Jonathan, if you're, totally watching this, but.
I'll send him a link.
Okay. So, I mean, like the liberal conservative, I remember he said that some of the personalities drawn to the extremes of the left and right, again, are very similar, like with the horseshoe theory. But these people are drawn to the extreme and they're there anyway, and they're the activist group and they're the ones speaking up and they're not turned into that. They already have a sort of black and white view of the world, and they, I don't know, like things clean. I don't know. I'm just saying Hitler apparently was like that.
I believe it. I haven't read Jonathan's work close enough, but I totally agree with that intuition that a lot of the same personality traits that probably make people ardent liberals, really far left doctrinaire liberals, it's probably the same ones that make them conservative and or far conservative. And you probably can't dislodge. You can't make those people more or less what they are. Maybe like a life-shattering event like marriage or children or a death could change people's attitudes. But passing through a 4-year university where you listen to some old guy talk in front of you for 90 minutes twice a week, that just doesn't have the impact people think it does.
Okay, but the reason why we think it does is I'll say anecdotal stories, but then there's the anecdotal protests of the Evergreen Spring that 2017. It's like, oh, it's an anecdote of the whole school going bananas. And again, I was wondering if what you think of that, but my thought is maybe those people were already far left open and were attracted to that school in the first place, and that they kind of already had the predisposition to be like, yeah, we'll hold on to that and we'll take it even further. Like, what do you think about that though?
Okay, well, let me then just back up a little bit. So
okay.
Faculty don't have much impact on what people think, like their political attitudes at least. It doesn't have much impact on whether you're Democrat, Republican, liberal, or conservative.
But they chanted, you taught us this.
Yeah, well.
That right? But that's why it's in our heads. Those of us who are like in that space online. It's like
the point I would just make is that university attracts extremely liberal students.
Yeah,
right?
That's what I was
So, one of the points I would make is that, or college rather, is that colleges and universities tend to, students tend to go to colleges that fit their personality already. Okay. So if you are a liberal high schooler, you are much, much more likely to go to a place like Evergreen State, or you're likely to go to, a small liberal arts college in New England. If you are a conservative, maybe you're more likely to go to a religious university or like a big state school. Separate from other issues of like SAT scores.
Mm-hmm.
So people tend to already kind of go to where they fit. On top of that, there is one other group that really does have a big impact on people's attitudes, although how it works is a bit hard, and that's peers. Okay. Students don't listen to their faculty, but they are probably affected by their peers. So one of the best predictors of to ask of whether or not a student's political attitudes are going to change when they're in university is who are they hanging out with, and how deeply socially embedded are they in those networks? So a liberal who hangs out with other liberal students and is deeply embedded in that social network is going to become more liberal. Okay. A conservative who hangs out in that same network is also going to become more liberal. So peer effects do matter. If
okay.
there is a
university
or college. What's that?
Sorry, in university, I cut you off. I think you were saying this. In university, it matters. To the extent
that there is an effect in college and university. So, for instance, to the effect that it makes people more gender egalitarian.
Yeah.
Or to the extent that it changes their views about homosexuality, right? LGBTQ issues. Where that happens is through peers.
Okay.
And in fact, there's a wonderful study by a guy named Dodson in a book called Professors and Their Politics. That
sounds riveting.
Well, God, yeah, the things I have to do.
No, it might actually be, but it
is interesting because in this book, what he, in this chapter in this book, what he does is he looks to see, he takes two groups of students who say they are, he took two groups of students who are otherwise very, very similar.
Okay.
Students who either say that they are very active in extracurriculars, they hang out with their friends, they go to parties, they are in sororities or fraternities. And then he looks at students who say that they don't do any of that, and instead they spend all their time with their professors, they have lots of contact in office hours, they attend class every single week.
They need to get a social life.
They need to get a social life. Well, it turns out that the ones that are the most socially embedded, that hang out with all their friends, they are the ones whose attitudes change the most.
Oh.
And in particular, they become more extreme. If you're a liberal, you become more liberal. If you're conservative, you become more conservative.
Oh.
And the reason is obvious. It's because when you want to make friends, you seek out people who are like you. If you're a conservative, you seek out other conservative friends. Yeah. And that reinforces your attitudes. It creates a bit of like an echo chamber maybe. Yeah. And it makes you more extreme. The same with liberals.
Yeah.
If you don't do that, then you're going to moderate.
Okay, so the ones who were hanging out with the professors, it sounded like they would be really, really affected by what the professor would say if they're like, I'm going to hang out with you in office hours a lot. Like, it sounds like they'd be like, mentor me, like it seems like that, but it didn't happen then.
No, I mean, the argument that Dodson makes is that you can't control the ideology of your faculty member, right? You can't control what that person believes. So all things being equal, if you go, chances are the person is going to disagree with you on a lot. The professor will. Or the professor will present evidence for an issue or readings that you'll disagree with. So there's very little homogeneity. There's less likely to be homogeneity between you and the professor.
Okay.
But when it comes to your friends, you have the entire university to pick from. You will gravitate towards people who agree with you. Right. So the likelihood of homogeneity is very high. So It's two different kinds of relationships, and one creates viewpoint diversity and political moderation, and the other creates a lack of viewpoint diversity and extremism.
Okay, so do parents have any effect? Like, I have my 3 boys, and I'm like,
you have huge effects.
I'm like, can I do anything? Like, you just hear peers all the time as like a huge influencer. So yeah. I hope that I can impact my kids.
Well, don't worry. I mean, as a parent, I have the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
The good news is that we have the biggest influence on what our kids' political attitudes are.
But then also I'm nervous that responsibility.
Yeah, I hope politics are the right kind of politics. Otherwise, I'm just kidding.
Yeah.
So yeah, you have a huge influence.
Okay.
The peers have influence in university compared to other actors.
Okay.
But again, even peers, it's limited because in the end, if you go in liberal, you're probably going to come out that way. If you go in conservative, you're probably going to come out that way.
Okay, so this leads me to why does it matter that the liberal, 5-to-1, 10-to-1, whatever, liberal conservative dichotomy? Why does that matter if it doesn't actually indoctrinate the students?
Yeah, totally. Okay.
I'm actually wondering that now. I'm like,
I know. I think it matters a lot.
Okay.
Let me rattle off some reasons. First of all, As you're probably aware, in America, we've seen this collapse in conservative and Republican support for higher ed, and in particular, a collapse motivated by the perception, falsely, I think, that professors are indoctrinating students, right? So the perception is there. Whether it's based in fact is almost immaterial.
Okay.
I'm worried.
So are we worried that conservative kids won't go to school to university? Is that where the worry is?
No, the worry is, I think, more that legislators will cut funding for universities.
Okay. In conservative
So like
spaces.
that's my main worry. I look at places like, for instance, the governor of Alaska last year proposed slashing the budget of the University of Alaska, system by 40%.
What?
Right? I mean, it would have required closing down some of the campuses and consolidating faculty in different departments. It would have been a body blow. It would have been irrecoverable. Now, that was for a lot of reasons. It's in part driven by just basic fiscal realities in the state, but universities are really tempting targets right now because the support on one side of the aisle is not there.
Mm-hmm.
People are not clamoring in defense of university professors in the Republican Party right now. Again, I think they're wrong to do, to have this attitude, but if the perception's there, it's a problem. So I worry about, fiscal austerity being leveled at universities driven by erroneous readings of the facts. So if we could kind of fix that imbalance, get more conservatives in there, that would be a good thing for that reason.
And what would they report back? Like, guys, it's not as bad as we were afraid it was.
I don't know. Wouldn't that be great if they sent emails back to Conservative HQ explaining that they're going to be welcome?
It kind of disseminates. I know it's not quite that cartoonish where it's like, let's send a letter back, but it feels like the information would be spread amongst, like the messages would be spread through conservatism somehow.
Well, yeah, I mean, like the best delegates, best representatives of the academy to conservatives are conservative professors.
Okay.
Right. And there are a lot of them who agree with my position, like that they think that these problems are overblown to the extent that they exist. They are easily mitigated. And those are the most effective, I think, when it comes to kind of like correcting these errors. The more such people we have doing that, the better the future will be for universities.
Okay, so I have a couple different directions, but I'm thinking so maybe tell me more reasons why.
Yeah, okay.
Why it's a problem about the ratio.
That's the first reason. The second reason to care is research outcomes. And I think this is what Jonathan Haidt and Lee Jussum and many others have focused on as being like the Achilles heel of liberal dominance in the faculty.
Okay.
So knowing what I know about how power and knowledge intersect in institutions like universities, I think it's ludicrous to think that the lack of political viewpoint diversity is not distorting research. Of course it is. Okay. So there are all kinds of questions that probably never occur to liberal researchers to ask that would occur to a conservative. Okay.
I do have a question. Sorry, I want you to go on. Okay, because I just did an interview with someone the other day, Bo Weingard, and I told you about this other day. So he was like, I'm against viewpoint diversity because I want the truth. I don't, and I get it. Okay, so his example was like, we don't want flat earth theory in schools, okay, that's viewpoint diversity. So can we give a definition of what you mean right now about viewpoint diversity?
Yeah, so I mean, like Heterodox Academy, which I'm sure as everyone knows is kind of like this academy or this organization of faculty devoted to viewpoint diversity.
Right.
I mean, they get this objection all the time. Okay. Do you want anti-vaxxers and flat earthers? Is that kind of what they want? Of course, that's not what they want.
Right.
What they want to maintain kind of like the rigor and the intellectual integrity of the academy, while at the same time also making space for as wide a space as possible, a spectrum possible within kind of like the disciplinary norms.
Okay.
Right. So if you
within reason,
Within reason, yeah. And like, I mean, academic disciplines like, like geography or astronomy are somewhat self-regulating. There are norms and mechanisms in place to keep people within a certain, broad research program. That
Okay.
would probably not include flat earthers, right?
Okay.
So, but it should include conservatives, right?
Right.
Obviously, it should.
Okay.
It,
So go on to what I kind of interrupted you about this definition thing. So what were
yeah,
you
I mean,
saying?
I'm sure, I'm sure the point that, like, the response to people like what Bo is saying is, yeah, we all just want the truth,
Yeah.
but you are less likely to get it in a climate that is politically or that is ideologically homogenous, because
Okay.
it closes off certain research questions. It shuts down certain methods of getting data, right? It just distorts things. Not always, not necessarily a lot, but it does.
Do you
And
have an example?
yeah, I mean, like, let me give you I think what is like a really famous example from my own field study of religion. Um, there's this thing called the secularization thesis,
Oh, it
and
sounds very, very interesting.
it's I think it's cool.
No, no,
So
no.
there's
I'm not being sarcastic. I actually know I'm very interested in religion. Sorry. Anyway.
I mean, this is one that you're going to immediately recognize because it's so well known. We get it from like Marx and Durkheim and Weber, and it's this idea in sociology of religion that as a society becomes more and more modern, capitalistic, democratic, whatever, it becomes more secular. People stop believing in religion, they stop going to church or temple or
Okay,
whatever.
yeah. It feels like that's kind of true.
Yeah,
Is
of
it
course,
not?
right? And you look
Okay.
around and you look at places like church attendance in Canada or, religious giving, like tithing in Europe, and you can see this correlation between how wealthy a country is, for instance, and how religious it is. It's
Hmm.
a inverse relationship.
Oh.
All right. So for a long time, this is what everyone thought was the case.
Uh-huh.
Like 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s in the American Academy, everyone assumed that this is what was happening in America. It was
Okay.
just understood that America was undergoing this process of secularization.
Okay.
The problem is, it just wasn't true. It was not happening.
Oh.
Religion was not declining. Religious membership, religious giving was not declining. And people couldn't see it. Scholars were refusing to either gather or understand the data that indicated this massive social fact predicted by this theory was not evident.
Okay.
It was not until, I don't want to put it all on this one guy, but this one guy in particular, a University of Chicago professor of sociology named Andrew Greeley, who, by the way, happened to also be a Roman Catholic priest, is the one who spotted this first and understood and then developed a theory in response.
Okay.
This is a beautiful example of viewpoint diversity at work.
Okay.
It has nothing to do necessarily with liberal or conservative, but it has everything to do with whether you are religious or secular. If you
Okay.
are a secular professor, you might already have this kind of inclination with that, oh, well, to be secular is to be more modern. To be secular is to be more liberal, more democratic. But if you are a Catholic priest, you can understand that those things don't always go together, or they're not. Religion is not always incompatible with capitalism and democracy. He spotted that first, and
Um,
I think
isn't
part
there
because
like sorry, it
yeah,
didn't Max Weber come up with Protestantism and the spirit of capitalism?
he did, yeah.
So I'm like, isn't that what the priest was saying? Is that
Well, I mean, what Weber argues is that Weber is, not to get too far afield, Weber is very, very careful about the language of causation. He does not really actually say or argue that Protestantism causes capitalism or capitalism causes Protestantism.
okay?
It's actually very
See,
delicate
okay.
about it.
I just
Um,
like read into it because I'm like,
yeah, no, I mean, it's totally legit. What
okay.
he does say is that as societies become more more capitalist, more individualist,
Yeah.
more atomized, the kind of the bonds that tie together religious communities will fray and fall apart. And when Weber talks about the Protestant ethic, what he's referring to in part is some of the theological assumptions in Protestantism, in
Hmm.
particular the idea that, so Martin Luther says that man is not saved by his good works, but he's saved by grace alone.
Yeah.
God decides who the elect are.
Yeah.
So if you're like a rich Dutch Calvinist, living in the year 1600 in Antwerp or something, and you are stupidly rich, but an evil person, how do you make sense of all the success that you've had? Or let me rephrase that. If you're really rich and really successful, what do you do if you want to get into heaven? You need to somehow, or to feel confident about that you're going into heaven, you demonstrate somehow that God favors you, that you are one of the elect. So what Weber says is that the Protestant ethic encourages people to focus on and acquire markers of worldly success as a way of illustrating that they are bound for heaven.
Oh, it's like Joel Osteen and the like name it and claim it, and the prosperity gospel. It's kind of like that, but back then.
Yeah, back then, and a hell of a lot more sophisticated. Like, I mean,
yeah.
than what Joel Osteen. I mean, Weber is extremely complicated. I think, and I'm not an expert. I don't teach him. But,
sorry, I just remember. Okay, I actually was, because I have a degree in Christian studies with a minor in history, and so my degree, like for one of my classes, I had to do a paper, and my professor was like, he had two suggestions he thought I would like. He's like, well, you could write, you could just look at this biography of William Wilberforce, or read The Protestant Ethic and the Spirit of Capitalism and write your paper on that. And
which one did you pick?
Wonders of wonders. I chose the Wilberforce one because I'm like, I don't have time to read a book and write the paper guy.
Right.
Like, I was like, I can work with a biography, like, but I can't, whatever. So that's what he told me about it. So that's my memory is like from like 10 years ago when I like wrote this paper, or when I didn't write this paper. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I haven't read it since graduate school. And it's a complex book. And it's one of those ones that people like read into a lot. Like I think that it's really easy to misunderstand what he's getting at.
Okay, so that's why I was like, oh wait, he was thinking about more secularism, even though he wrote the Protestant Ethic. But you're saying he was actually on board with that Protestant, or with the secularization of society.
Absolutely, yeah. Weber talks about, for instance, how Protestantism gets rid of the priesthood, like the entire apostolic line of succession, and anybody can be a priest, basically, is what Weber says in Protestantism. And he says that in a world where everybody's a priest, nobody's a priest. In a world where there are no longer any monastery walls, all the world will be secular. So his idea is that when you tear down the thing that differentiates lay folk from clerics, people will stop being clerics. You lose that religious connection.
I see. So he's like, oh no, Protestantism is already halfway to secularism.
I don't know if he would say that, but he would definitely say that there is a strong relationship.
Well, on my show, I like to reduce things to the absurd.
Weber totally says that. It's actually there in the subtitle of the book.
No. I just like, I'm like, oh, but wait, I need to just like really distill it down to like a soundbite.
Yeah. I mean, it's Weber doesn't really permit that, I don't think, but for definitely like
for our purposes,
he makes this
like there's no laity, and there's everyone's a laity, and like so that kind of sounds like that for me.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this is like a classic Catholic knock against Protestants. I don't know if it's true or not, but it's definitely the claim that they make. And this is, I think, what everybody assumed, probably also because of Protestant dominance within the American Academy and the study of religion in particular. And it took a Roman Catholic priest to kind of understand that that's not what was going on.
Yes, you've brought us back.
Yeah. So Andrew Greeley, what a career. I mean, like, he was a sociologist. He's this Roman Catholic priest. He was a novelist. And like, he was not a dilettante in any of those. One thing that he did, which is fantastic, really influential, is he studied for the Roman Catholic Church. He wrote reports on the status of American Catholicism and the status of American clergy, trying to understand, what's going on, what are their educational outcomes, how religious are they? So he kind of gave a profile of what it's like to be a priest in America in the 1960s and 70s, which was like a turning point in global Catholicism, because that's when the Second Vatican Council was held, and the nature of Catholic liturgy and theology were decisively kind of rewritten. So
Okay.
he was there to explore the effects of that.
Okay. What did he see that the others didn't see?
I mean, I think what he saw is that he's somebody who was steeped in American religiosity. He was steeped in American Catholicism. He was part of that community, and he understood full well that you could be as liberal, you could be as wealthy, you could be as educated as anybody else, and you could still be religious. You could still be a believer, right? The assumption of secularization thesis is that these things are incompatible, that science is going to like erode the foundations of the American church, that democracy is going to reduce us from members of communities to isolated voters. That's the secularization thesis. And what he found is that it's just not reflective in the American reality.
So people are like, I'm still a Catholic, even though I don't look like I'm practicing.
No, more than that. Not only am I still a Catholic, but I'm going to Mass.
They are
week.
Okay.
I'm going to confession, right? I take the sacrament.
They're still participating. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, how did they miss? How did others miss it? How did the other people miss this?
I mean, this is the amazing thing about what lack of viewpoint diversity does. If everybody operates on the same assumptions, then there's no sense in studying anything that betrays that assumption. If everybody assumes that America is getting more secular, then you don't go to study churches, you study community centers. If everybody believes that nobody is becoming baptized anymore, then you don't go and look how baptisms happen. Instead, you look at quinceañeras, right? That's a really stupid comparison. But my point is that, like, the point is that, if you have an understanding about the way the world works, then it really will distort. If you never have your way of viewing the world challenged, it will distort the kind of academic research you do.
Okay, so they're not going to the right places, and they didn't even know they weren't.
Exactly, because it was just kind of like settled business, like, check, secularization thesis is real, it's happening. So why even bother looking at this boring topic, American Catholics? So
this guy Greeley he legitimately is, I want to know, I want to find out about these stats. So he conducted the research in a proper manner, I assume.
Oh yeah.
And it was, I guess, double checked by others to like, oh, is this correct? Like, follow up?
He was a top notch researcher in his time. There's he was University of Chicago. He was one of the research associate at the National Opinion Research Council. So like a very, very well respected academic. He's not by any stretch the only person doing this work,
right?
But there were not many of them, and they were pushing against the tide. And I think my intuition is that it's because there were not enough devout people working in the academy. There were probably not enough Catholics working in this space, because Catholicism at that time was kind of like Catholics were shut out of a lot of research opportunities and academic posts.
Interesting. And the whole point, here's the thing, is I'm around a lot of like scientists on Twitter, and what I get, like, when they talk about how amazing science is, which is great. Yeah, science is great.
It is great.
It's great. But they're like, it's like the scientific method shuts out opinion. Like,
okay.
Again, sorry, that's what I get. Like, so, you saw me sort of like distill vapor. So I might have a little bit of, I might see it wrong, but that's what they're saying. It's objective. I have seen claims of objectivity because of the scientific method. This is where I guess, I'm sure one of your other interviewers, Liam Bright, would be like, he would have a great answer or response to this, because he understands kind of like the philosophy behind the scientific method much better than I do. Yeah.
But look, my intuition is probably that viewpoint diversity on like a left-right political spectrum matters much, much less in physics and in chemistry than it does in sociology and political science. Like I'm sure we can all agree with that.
It
But
does
even
matter there. Okay.
yeah, but I think it definitely matters in the social sciences and humanities, and it probably matters for all kinds of questions that are more germane to, STEM sciences, STEM fields as well. I mean, the kinds of issues that physicians look at, medical researchers, the kind of populations that they decide to study. If you're somebody who if you're a scientist, if you're a doctor and you're interested in causes of stress, right, and you're doing research on stress, the population that you take as typical is going to depend probably on the way you perceive your community or the population of interest.
Okay.
The groups that you test and look at. I mean, I don't want to get over my skis here because I'm not an expert in these fields, but I think in lots of kinds of scientific enterprises, the choices that scientists make, many of them are probably driven strictly by the scientific method or by the practical demands of access to data and so forth. But some of them, I'm sure, in some cases, are driven by assumptions about how the world works that probably reflect biases.
Right. And even you mentioning data is, and you saying about what is your focus group of the norm, even that, and which is why it seems like we need to do a lot of data sets. Is that the right way to say it? Yeah. Right. You need to.
Yeah, sure. You have to see if your assumptions kind of replicate across multiple different data sets, or is it just a function maybe of the fact that you are only looking at Western educated, highly developed contexts. You're only looking at people in America. You might get a very different response if the experiment were run, say somewhere else, else in the world. So I think if you don't understand certain realities about the world, then it's going to probably distort the questions you ask, the tools you use, and the conclusions that you reach. Probably not as much if you're looking at quasars, right? But it will definitely make a difference if you're looking in areas of, let's say, epidemiology or, animal behavior. Like there are lots of different things you could look at.
Right. Okay. So what are other reasons about why viewpoint diversity is good? Because we covered 2 reasons, I believe.
Covered 2. I would say a third really big reason is mentorship, right? There are a lot of conservatives a lot of conservative students, and they're going to trust more and be more comfortable with and probably make better decisions with faculty that they kind of see themselves in. So we should want to have a faculty that can best serve its student population. Like that's one of the goals. Like there are many goals. That's one of them. And I think that if you've got conservative faculty, they can probably, all things being equal, better serve conservative students. I think if you've got Black faculty, they'll do a better job with Black students, all things being equal. I think that people want to see something of themselves in the, quote, authority figures in any kind of institution. You want to see that you're represented. You want to see that there's an avenue for you to advance in that institution if you choose to. Representation matters.
It reminds me of people wanting to see themselves in on television or in movies or in Disney princesses or whatever. And I do see a lot of pushback about why that doesn't really who cares? But it does matter.
Yeah. I think this is one of the real ironies is that the people who say representation doesn't matter, who cares if the Disney princess is Black or white, who cares if a woman is depicted as a scientist versus a man? I think, I don't want to generalize.
No, I was thinking it. We're both thinking it.
You're both thinking it. It's usually people on the right-hand side who say that.
Yeah.
But they are also the ones who say, we are suffering on campus because of the lack of conservatives professors, right?
It does matter.
Conservative administrators. I can give you a clear example of this. I'm sure you know who Milo Yiannopoulos is, right? Yes, sadly. Okay.
Yes.
So, like a year and a half ago now, the UCLA college Republicans wanted to invite Milo to campus,
Okay.
and they wanted to invite Milo to campus because they were, as they explained, they were just sick and tired of being pushed around. They wanted to make a fuss. They wanted to make some noise. They knew what he was, like this kind of bomb thrower, but they wanted to like make a ruckus because they were sick of being marginalized.
Oh, okay.
And not making any kind of headway on campus, right?
Okay.
In growing their group. All right, that's what they said. That's how they explained it. Their supervisor is a sociologist named Gabriel Rossman,
Okay.
who is a conservative, and he sat down with them and later went public with a letter explaining, listen, guys, I know what it's like to be a conservative on campus. I know it can be difficult. I know you can sometimes feel mocked or marginalized. This is not the right answer. Don't invite someone of substance. And to their credit, they listened and they decided to revoke their invitation.
Okay.
That is the difference that a sympathetic ear makes. That is a difference that viewpoint diversity makes in terms of mentorship.
Oh, that is really interesting because you
Yeah.
believe them.
I mean, wouldn't you believe somebody who kind of like speaks your language, understands your experiences?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So
Yeah. That's good. Yeah, that's a good example. Are there any more or reasons? Like, I mean, I don't want to. 3 is enough, but is there anything else?
Yeah, I think those are the big ones.
Okay.
I mean, I think the other thing to think about, this is kind of separate from those other ones, is we should probably also care. We should care about viewpoint diversity to the extent that it brushes up against issues of equity. And by that I mean that if it is the case that one of the reasons why liberals dominate the academy is because conservatives are discriminated against at some point in the graduate student to faculty pipeline, then of course we should care about that, right? Because your personal politics shouldn't matter for whether you get a teaching position.
Right.
So if it is the case, and there is some evidence that it factors in, if it is the case that conservatives are discriminated against in terms of hiring, publication, grant, support, funding, financial support, if there's evidence for that stuff, then that should concern us, and we should want to redress it so that the only thing that makes it that your politics doesn't make a difference to how far you go.
Okay, because that is something. It's so hard to tell because you see things, and this is one example or a couple examples, and you're like, same thing with the whole, kids are getting the indoctrination thesis, like you said. You see a couple examples, so then you just assume. But with the faculty thing, I have seen a number of faculty concern or results like, I'm anonymous now because I wasn't, and I actually got fired because someone pointed out to my boss, and I just got a new job, so now I'm anonymous on Twitter because of that. Or like friends being, I don't know if I can get a job, I've been very vocal on Twitter, let's hope, so again, it's anecdotal, but is there data, is there evidence about political views that are like the wrong think or whatever, or conservative, like not getting jobs because of that?
Yeah, I mean, this is a super hard thing to study because what you're measuring takes place in the black box of a
hiring committee or HR.
Hiring committee's mind. Like, how do you know the factors that go in?
Yeah,
I do tend to agree that it must happen at least some of the time. Right. I think it's naive to think it doesn't. You take any kind of group that's homogenous as the faculty, as the American Academy is, I think hiring or firing discrimination probably does happen. Okay. How much has happened? All right. So there have been a couple different surveys done of varying reliability that ask anonymously to faculty members, would you be less willing to hire somebody who is very liberal or very conservative?
Okay.
And specifically the fields that have been queried are philosophy and psychology.
Okay.
And they have found that there is a disturbing amount that says politics would factor in.
Oh, okay.
Now that can mean all kinds of things, right? Sometimes it's a very, very minimal effect. They say like, I mean, I would weigh research output. I would weigh teaching record. And then if everything is equal, I would probably, between two candidates, I would go towards the liberal, right?
Okay.
So like a lot of it is very, very minor. But I mean, probably any amount is a bad thing.
Well, should it factor in at all?
Not unless there's like a really strong professional reason, and I don't even know what that would be.
Right. So it
I mean,
shouldn't
like
matter.
I probably wouldn't hire someone who's like a Nazi, like
Yeah.
an out and out Nazi. But I mean, like if you are a conservative or a Republican, I couldn't care less as
Okay.
long as you do your job well, right?
Okay. Yeah, it does. Yeah, it kind of,
Yeah.
it seems like it does factor in more than it maybe should.
Yeah, I mean, again, we don't know. Like all we have is people saying this, and a lot of these surveys are really bad. I'm not even, and when I say this,
Oh,
there aren't that many surveys. There are really only about 4 different surveys that have been done in the last 10 years that look
okay,
at this.
heterodox. Like, let's get this studied. Like, why aren't people studying it?
Um,
Because
I
it's
think
hard?
again, I think well, okay, it's very difficult, and the things that people tell you in a survey are not always accurate about what's going on.
Okay.
So there are other methods. There's also experimental methods. So let me give you one thing that might reassure conservative listeners who want to go into the academy.
Okay, okay.
There's an experiment that was done, like you know how audit studies work, where you send out a bunch of different applications for a job or something, and then you
Okay.
alter a detail to like you make them
Yeah,
either
different
Muslim or Christian.
name or yeah, or yeah.
Yeah, so this has been done with graduate school applications.
Hmm.
So in one experiment that they did, a team out of Harvard, they sent out hundreds of applications or letters to directors of graduate studies in different universities, asking, hey, I'm interested in applying to graduate school with you. Here's my CV. If you could look it over and let me know whether you think I'd be a good fit for your program.
Hmm.
And then what they altered is whether the person worked in the past on the McCain campaign or the Obama campaign.
Okay.
And there was no difference in response rates from the directors of graduate studies. There was no difference in support. There was no difference in how much enthusiasm the director had for the student application. So that's one place where you might think if discrimination takes place, that's where you'd see it. That these people would steer conservatives or McCain supporters away from their departments. It doesn't happen.
Okay.
So I think that's one example of good experimental design that shows one particular point in the pipeline to faculty. We don't see discrimination.
Okay, I actually realized I don't know if it's that I forgot to ask, or maybe it just didn't. Maybe this is where maybe this is the right place to ask this. So why are there less conservatives compared to liberals in the academy at this point in time?
That's a great question.
Awesome. I know, I'm like, this is actually
okay.
like, I think I have to ask this before I end this interview because it's kind of integral.
I don't have an answer for you. So let me just summarize what might be going on. Some different theories.
Okay.
First is this discrimination, right? The first is
what we just kind of talked about a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'd be lying if I didn't think there was some element of truth to this, especially in some disciplines you might be more likely to find discriminatory behavior. And then it's not just when you enter into graduate school. It also has to do with whether you get a tenure track job, whether you get a fly out for an interview, whether you get the funding you need in order to become a full professor. Like there are multiple moments when discrimination could be felt. And in different fields, they studied this. Law faculties have studied this a lot. There's a lot of research on law faculties. And it's possible that
Hello? Hello? Oh, no. Hello? Jeff?
Hey, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes. Hi. I'm
Sorry.
here. The connection.
Where did I come up?
So it's possible that that's a lie.
Yeah,
So faculties, I don't remember. Maybe just start.
Yeah. So it's possible that there is discrimination at certain points in the life of an academic, in the career of the academy. There are moments, whether it's in getting your call out for an interview, getting hired, getting promoted, there are multiple points where you might see discrimination.
Okay.
And that needs to get studied a lot more.
Okay.
So that's one explanation.
Yeah.
Another explanation is self-selection.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Yeah. There's a lot of evidence that self-selection explains at least most of the gap. And it works in a lot of different ways. First of all, conservative students are much more likely to major in STEM fields, business fields. Those are those are fields where there are careers outside of the academy that you can easily transition into.
Yes.
Whereas liberals gravitate towards careers towards the humanities, social sciences, where there's no jobs. Obvious jobs, right? So like if you are majoring in English, chances are better you will want to go to graduate school for English. But if you're an undergrad majoring in chemistry, you might just want to get a $60,000 a year salary job when you graduate, right? So like right away, you see the potential for self-selection. And we also know that conservatives report, even as freshmen, that they tend to place a higher value on things like salary, starting a family, living in a part of the country where they want to live.
Yeah.
So those are all things that are kind of incompatible with
right. Okay, because you kind of have to move around as an academic, right? Right.
Yeah, you have to. I mean, like sometimes you have to delay starting a family. Sometimes you have to live on a very small salary, like graduate student stipend. So that also puts pressure on students that kind of forces out conservatives. So that's like
I get it. Like I get that. Like they're like, I've got a plan, thanks.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you are somebody who is conservative and you want to start a family before you're 25 and you want to have a good paying job and a mortgage, then the last thing you want to do is become an academic. Like it'd be the worst thing you could do.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to exaggerate, but I mean, like it's difficult.
It would be difficult. So, okay. Well, as an academic, you are telling me it is difficult.
I think it is. Yeah, I've been very fortunate. But it is a problem. So I think that's a big place where self-selection happens.
Okay.
There are other places as well that it happens on the pipeline. I mean, like if you are a chemist with a master's degree or a PhD, you can make a lot of money if you drop out of the academy and get a job in a pharmaceutical plant, right? In a lab. So, I mean, there's good evidence for the self-selection thesis.
Okay.
And that research is, I think, very compelling.
Okay.
The last part of it, so discrimination, self-selection, the last component is conversion. And the argument there is that conservatives, just over the course of their time in the academy, become more liberal. Not because they're trying to disguise who they are, but because maybe of the community effect. So people often adopt the political values of the communities they're within.
I see.
If it's the case that universities are located disproportionately in liberal areas, like New England has a lot of colleges, right? Urban centers have a lot of universities. These are areas that are disproportionately liberal. It's quite possible that people are becoming more liberal as a result of just existing in this industry.
Okay.
And I think there's really something to this, especially when you look at the fact that right now in America there is this widening education gap between Republican voters and Democratic voters. It's one of the biggest factors in the 2016 election. If you have a graduate degree or a college degree, you are much more likely to be liberal and vote Clinton than conservative and vote Trump. And that's not just happening in academia. That's happening in all kinds of sectors, in arts, in science, it's happening in business. It's happening in all kinds of parts of the world, or parts of the economy. So the academy might not be that unique. What we're seeing in the academy might be that people who fit the profile of an academic are becoming more liberal, just like everybody else that fits that profile. If you are highly educated, if you are living in an urban center, it doesn't matter whether you are, an academic or not. You're probably going to become more liberal.
Okay, well, I mean, you can't, hey, stick to your conservative ways, guys. You can't do that? Like, what is the solution to this? To the, because your reasons, the reasons that you gave about why it matters, like the mentorship thing and the other ones, like it seems to matter, and
Yeah.
like you'd want to get more. How do we retain the conservatives?
I don't know. This is my depressing conclusion. I don't know.
Oh.
I don't think we're going to. This is my depressing fact. I don't think that you can really turn back this tide very easily. That is a hard truth. But right now we are, if the goal is to get more conservatives in the academy, you are pushing back against this demographic trend that's visible throughout the American workforce
and
right now.
Freedom of choice. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there are steps that can be taken. And I think a good model, I don't want to make an inflammatory comparison, but a good model is the fact that, we should want women to have the choice, if they have the ability, if they choose to go into a STEM field. And STEM fields in academia have really tried to make space and opportunities for women, not always successfully, right? I'm sure you know better than I do, like this kind of, sometimes there's a tension where certain spaces in the academy can be hostile towards women scientists.
I've heard of it. I've heard both. I've heard, okay, there's this woman named Marissa Orr who wrote a book about her time at Google and Facebook, and it just describing it not be like there's so much money going into these get women in, but they're not retaining the women because the way that the entire corporate structure is set up does not keep women, because women are not driven by the competition that men are. That women don't like stepping on other women, and the ones who do succeed, small percentage, personality wise. But so I've heard that it's just the way that corporate structures are created. They're more masculine, more hierarchical, whereas women prefer a win-win as opposed to win and lose. So I've heard that, but I have also heard that it's sort of hostile to boys club-ish too. Like I've heard both.
Yeah, and I guess I don't know the answer. Like I have my intuitions, but without any kind of like hard data, I really don't want to venture a guess. But I would just say that there are all these, there's all this effort put into developing resources to help women, if they choose to succeed in the academy. Okay. We should do the same thing, for all of our students. And we should think about, among the populations that we need to target in that way, maybe conservatives should be part of that. But I'm not very optimistic. Honestly, I'm not.
Okay, but in the Bible Belt, like in the conservative states, they have universities.
Yeah.
Can they not hire them within themselves?
I mean, one of the best resources we have, or the best sites we have for increasing the proportion of conservatives in the academy are land-grant universities, right? Okay. Land-grant universities are engines for this. If it's going to happen anywhere, it's going to be there. It's not going to be Harvard or Yale or Stanford. And we shouldn't necessarily just single out the Ivy Leagues the best. We should want conservatives everywhere, representative to their interest. Right. And that, I think land grants are a really good place where that effort can be focused.
I don't actually know what land grants are. Can you explain?
Well, no, I mean, a land grant is, these are universities. They're these huge state schools that serve very much the populations that they're located in, and they serve their surrounding community. And they were developed generally after World War II or a bit earlier in response to the sudden surge of interest in higher ed in the U.S. population. And they're great. They're engines of economic growth, and they need to be revitalized, and they need to be invested in. And maybe to tie this all back in a nice pretty bow before we end is that this is one of my concerns about the threat that we're facing right now, where the people who are most upset about liberal dominance in the academy, conservative legislators, are shooting themselves in the foot by cutting off funding to schools like land grants, because they are the places conservative academics and students can thrive.
Right. Okay. Well, fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Yeah. I mean, if we had another hour, I could talk a lot more about possible solutions. But
Right.
I mean, the reality is, I'm not super optimistic right now that things are going to change.
Well, just keep doing your research, man. It looks like we need
Yeah.
it. And we'll see in the future. I guess we won't know till, more time goes by and we see if it looks like there's making a tidal turn or not.
Yeah, and maybe I'll just say, like, to any conservative listeners of yours who want to go to the academy, like, it's not what you may have been told. It's not as hostile as you probably think,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll probably find a lot of people just like you who want to do this
Right.
this work. So, I mean, like, I think it's actually a pretty great place to get a job.
Okay. Well, good. That was kind of a positive end. So.
Maybe more uplifting. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks so much for chatting with me, Jeff. This was
My pleasure.
great. I think we covered. I'm really glad I got that last question of like, why is this disparity happening? I'm glad I got that in. Otherwise, I think I would have been like, oh, I'm missing a part during the editing. So all done, all tied up. So yeah, thank you so much for chatting. And maybe I'll talk with you at some point, someday, about your field of is it religion? Like you said, religion is your field?
Yeah, it's law and religion.
Law and okay, well, mainly which?
In the Middle East.
In the Middle East. Oh, okay. Oh well, I'm sure something will come.
Something will pop up there.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it's like a really quiet area. Really,
exactly.
Really not much happening, but we'll see. Okay. Okay. Thanks so much, Jeff.